Victor will speak on the Eucharistic Lord, seeing with the eyes of love. Please join me in welcoming Victor Negron.
Thank you, Mary Jane. I was waiting to talk because I thought I was going to start my talk at 10 a.m. I'm looking at my watch and I'm thinking, good thing I'm not billing Mary Jane by the hour. All right, so, Bishop Mike's homily really was very inspiring to me. I'm sure it was to you all as well. And one of the most significant things he said this morning was, our vocations are not over. People ask me, well, when are you going to retire? I think I'm going to die at my desk. I don't know. Because there are so many things for us to do. And when we stop doing, when we start thinking our lives are over, this is it, I'm running out of runway, you will run out of runway. You will. So what can we do? Well, one of the things we can do is dedicate an hour of our week to the Lord in adoration. I want to kind of talk to you about that, and I want to talk to you about my encounter with Christ and what led me into adoration. So I was a Eucharistic minister at Methodist Hospital. I'm sure many of you have acted as extraordinary ministers of the Eucharist, nursing homes and hospitals and other places, taking the Eucharist to the sick. You've done that. I've done that. And when I was doing that, it became routine for me. I think it became too much of a routine, like receiving communion becomes a routine for us. And in that routine, I got to the point where I would go to the tabernacle, get my picks out, the container where you put the hosts, and then collect the number of hosts based on the number of Catholics that I thought I was going to see that day at the hospital. Put them in the picks, put them in my pocket, and start room 102, and let's start delivering Jesus around to people. It was too routine for me. Well, the Lord was going to teach me a lesson. He was going to encounter me. I was going to encounter him. So one day, unbeknownst to me, there's a young lady in a room, in a single room, and she's lamenting about her life. She's feels lonely. She's sick. She's fearful. She's looking out the window to the hill country, and she's thinking, Lord Jesus, you have abandoned me. Everybody's abandoned me. My family, I'm here by myself, and even you have abandoned me. And at that moment, I knocked on her door, and I entered her room and offered her the Eucharist. That was earth-shattering to me, because she told me, she was crying, and she told me, I'm sorry, it's just kind of let me compose myself. And she did. And while she composed herself, I thought, I made this lady upset. And in fact, that was not the case. She told me that she had been crying to the Lord and telling the Lord that he abandoned her at the moment I came into her room with the Eucharist. So that was Jesus' way of telling me, you're carrying me around in your pocket, and you're my feet, you're my hands, you're my mouth, you're my ears. You're doing this for me, and you're coming to this sick lady because she was crying out for me. So that shook me to the core. It helped me recommit, if you will, to my belief in the Eucharist. And I wanted to continue exercising that belief in some way. So I was sitting at Mass at St. Matthew's one Sunday, and there was a Dominican priest that came to speak to us about adoration. That was their Sunday where they were going to preach about adoration and try to get people to sign up, because St. Matthew's had recently started back then their 24/7 Eucharistic adoration, perpetual adoration as it is known. So I sat in the pews listening like everyone else, and then when they handed out the sign-up sheets, I thought, this is something that I can do. I can do an hour a week, which is what they were asking for. So I signed up, turned it in at the collection, and then about 2 or 3 days later, I got a call from the coordinator. She said, you signed up, but you didn't put down a day or a time when you can adore. They were looking for a commitment. And without thinking, I said, well, what time do you need? She says, well, we need Thursday mornings at 2 a.m. Well, okay. Have you ever seen a lawyer put his foot in his mouth? Yeah. I don't mean congressman, I mean a lawyer. So I was in a bit of a dilemma. Here I was committing myself to God, but telling him Thursday mornings at 2 a.m. I'm asleep. No, I can't do that. But I didn't want to do that. I said, okay, you know what? I signed up, so here I am. I'll commit. That was January of 1989, and I have since continued that holy hour. How do I have the time and the energy to do what I do every day? I mean, I'm still working full-time, and I'm not slowing down. I turned 70 this year, and so I grew up in the 50s and 60s, like many of you did. But life goes on, and my vocation goes on, and yours does too. So I'm here to challenge you this morning to think seriously about committing some time to the Lord weekly. Many of us don't have transportation. Hard for us to get to the church, certainly to a church at 2 a.m. Some of us are fearful. I won't point her out, but I know that there is a woman here in the audience today that goes to adoration 4 times a week, starting at 2:30 in the morning and ending at sometime around 7 or 7:30 in the morning, every one of those 4 days. She's in her 80s. Okay? So that's a challenge. I live near SeaWorld, and I have to travel to St. Matthew's when I do that 2 a.m. hour. I'm going to do what St. Paul did this morning. I'm not going to boast. I'm telling you this so that you will understand that you can have a completely full life that the Lord will continue filling if you make that commitment. Now, I want to see a show of hands. How many are in the choir? In other words, I'm preaching to the choir. How many of you regularly go to adoration? Okay, there's probably about 15 of you maybe? Okay. Those are the people that have gotten to where I think I've gotten, in the sense of understanding that the Lord Jesus is really present in the Eucharist. We do too. You believe that. You believe in the real presence. And what did Bishop Mike say at his homily? He said, you know, the youth they're not going to listen to the words. They're going to watch our actions. They're coming up behind us. Okay? So in order to kind of help strengthen your belief in the Eucharist even more than you have already, I'm going to read you the report of a physician by the name of Ricardo Castañón Gomez. Dr. Gomez lived in Argentina, I believe. And there was a Eucharistic miracle that took place in the 90s, so about 30 years ago in Argentina, 25, 30 years ago. On August 15th, 96, in the parish of Santa Maria, a parishioner received the consecrated host in his hands during communion, but inadvertently dropped the Eucharist on the floor and didn't want to pick it up because they thought it was soiled. Another more pious person realized what had happened, picked up the host, and put it aside while quickly informing the parish priest. The priest followed the instructions of the church in these circumstances and put the Eucharist in a container of distilled water, covered it, and put it in the tabernacle where it would dissolve theoretically. On August 26, about 11 days later, the tabernacle was reopened to remove the fallen host from the container, and it was found that the host had not dissolved and had some reddish stains on it that were growing day by day. The priests that were witnesses to this miracle hurriedly went to the Archbishop of Buenos Aires, a gentleman by the name of Cardinal Jorge Mario Bergoglio. You may recognize him as Pope Francis. They told him what had happened, decided that before proceeding with investigation, the Archbishop said that he was going to allow scientific investigations and told Dr. Gomez, the author of this report, to take the lead on that. In October of '99, remember this happened in August of '96. So 3+ years later, Dr. Gomez goes to Buenos Aires and interviews the 5 priests who witnessed the event and who told him that another host had bled in May of '92, 4 years preceding this particular host. They put it in distilled water, which is the worst way to preserve one of the hosts, and he was very concerned about that. At the first miracle, the priest had a chemist around among the parishioners who had been asked to analyze the host. The professional chemist had discovered that it was human blood, revealing the presence of the various leukocytes. I don't know how many of you here are medical professionals, but leukocytes cannot live outside the body more than 15 minutes. She was surprised, the chemist was surprised to find the white blood cells were active. However, she could not proceed with genetic examination because at that time it was not easy to carry out genetic testing. Dr. Gomez took a sample of the 2 hosts that had bled, the 92 and the 96 host, and took the host in the presence of the Archiepiscopal notary, who certified the legality of the act as required by the church authorities in Argentina. In October of '99, he went to the genetics laboratory, which was doing the analysis of the samples he had brought. January of 2000, the specialists found fragments of human DNA in the samples. They were human blood that contained human genetic code. In March of 2000, Dr. Gomez was informed by the famous Dr. Robert Lawrence, a forensic histopathologist and one of the leading experts in tissue analysis. The scientists explained to Dr. Gomez that they had sought this collaboration. Dr. Lawrence studied the samples in which he found human tissue and white blood cells. In 2001, Dr. Gomez went to Professor Linoli, who identified the white blood cells and told him that the samples most likely matched heart tissue. The results obtained from the samples are similar to those studies carried out in the miracle of Lanciano, Italy, which is another Eucharistic miracle. In '02, they sent the sample to Professor John Walker of the University of Sydney in Australia. So you've had several scientists looking at these samples throughout time. Dr. Walker, Professor Walker, confirmed that the samples had intact muscle cells and white blood cells, which normally disintegrate once they are out of the body for more than 15 minutes. In September of '03, Professor Lawrence confirmed to Dr. Gomez that in light of the new investigations, it could be concluded scientifically that the sample corresponded to the tissue of an inflamed heart, which meant that the person to whom it belonged must have been in great pain. In March of '04, in order to remove any doubt, Dr. Gomez called in the leading expert on cardiac pathology and forensic medicine, a Professor Frederick Zugibe of Colombia. Professor did not know that the sample that Dr. Gomez was bringing to him was from a consecrated host. After studying it, Dr. Zugibe said, "The sample you brought me is a heart muscle, a myocardium, more precisely, the left ventricle. I'm not a medical professional, but I think the left ventricle is where the blood exits the heart." And he confirmed that my patient had suffered a great deal, so I asked him, "Why do you say that?" "Because your patient has some thrombus at certain times preventing breathing, oxygen supply, tiring, and making the patient suffer because every breath had to be painful. He probably suffered a blow to the chest. On the other hand, cardiac activity was high at the time you brought me the sample." Cardiac activity was high at the time the sample was delivered to this man. "The white blood cells were found intact, and these are only transported by blood. Therefore, if there are white blood cells, it's because at the time you brought me the sample, it was beating. The professor then asked me whose sample it was, and when I told him it was from a consecrated host, he said, I don't believe you. He was very impressed. He said, Doctor, when you brought me that sample, that heart was alive. The report was sent on March 05, 5.5 years after the studies began, and the conclusions were as follows. This is heart tissue. There are degenerative changes in the myocardium, which are due to the fact that the cells are inflamed. This concerns the left ventricle of the heart. In March of 06, I brought these results to Cardinal Bergoglio. That is a modern Eucharistic miracle, less than 30 years old. The Lord is telling us that He gives us His heart in the Eucharist. So what we took this morning at Mass was the beating heart of Jesus. There's another Eucharistic miracle, and I can't cite it right now, but if you go to the website for Blessed Carlos Acutis, A-C-U-T-I-S, you're probably going to find description of this miracle. In this particular miracle, this other one, the Eucharist had started to change from the appearance of bread into human heart tissue and then human heart. So we know that the host is really not a host. I think that's probably a misnomer. It doesn't host anything. It is the body, blood, soul, and divinity of Christ. And so some remarks as we finish up. Bishop Mike also talked about relationships. You can visit virtually with AI, artificial intelligence, the kids call it. I do hearings by Zoom. There are other lawyers in this room that do the same thing I do. I'm an arbitrator, so I conduct hearings by Zoom. And guess what? It's not the same thing as I do mediations too. When you mediate between two warring parties and you're trying to get them to make a deal, you've got to eyeball them and they have to eyeball you, and you have to establish a level of trust with those people. You can't do that as well via Zoom. I've tried it, and I have settled cases via Zoom, but whenever people want me to settle something, I ask them if at all possible, let's do it in person. And so what Bishop Mike was talking about, relationships, we can develop a relationship with Christ, but it's going to be really hard to do that once a week at Mass. The kids are crying in the back. The lady in front of us isn't wearing appropriate clothing. A guy's eating a piece of chocolate. What do I have to do at work tomorrow? Time's up. What do we have to do tomorrow? What do I have to do this week? What are my assignments? My grandkids are sick, blah, blah, blah. You know, I mean, we all have life. We all have those things happen in our lives. And when do we find the best time to think about them? At Mass on Sunday. It's quiet time, right? So I found that going to Mass is a great experience if you can people just kind of leave you alone and let you pray and center and all. Doesn't happen. It's always something. Got to Mass late. It's hotter. It's 116 degrees outside. You know, we ran into the church. We barely beat the priest getting into the sanctuary. So in order to develop a relationship with Jesus, we're going to have to spend some one-on-one time with Him. Well, the Eucharist does that. Yeah, the Eucharist does that. And yes, we had one-on-one time, and then we came over here and we started eating breakfast, and things happen. But that one-on-one time that you can get in the chapel, and by the way, don't crowd the early morning hours. Those are really the best hours because no one else is there. Okay, except the cleaning people. Sometimes they show up at that hour. But that one-on-one time is how you're going to establish a relationship with Jesus, a good, solid relationship with Him. It doesn't diminish or demean any other form of relationship with Jesus, like helping the sick. tending to those that need help in society. Those are wonderful ways. Look at Mother Teresa. Spent an hour in adoration, I think at least, every day. And then what does she go do? Tend to the sick. And that's how she connected with Jesus. The Eucharist and people. God and neighbor. God and neighbor. Okay? So some thoughts. The older I get, the faster time seems to pass. I don't know about you all. Christmas now comes every 3 months. It's because we are creatures of time that we feel it more. And because we're older, we appreciate what's an hour, what's 3 days, what's a month, what's a year. You know, my 9-year-old granddaughter said, "Grandpa, you won't let me watch TV for 2 days?" In 2 days, it go like this. Don't worry, it'll come and go quickly. Guess what? God is outside of time. He invented time for us. But every time you step into the presence of God, you step outside of time. Well, how can we do that? Well, we go into His presence in adoration, and time stops for us. In the Eucharist, guess what? We could participate in the life of Christ, in His passion, His death, and His resurrection. They are all present to God at once. He can see all time at once. He can see when you were born, when your first tooth came out, when you started walking, potty training. God, He can see everything. All moments in your life, He sees all at once. Okay? And guess what? He sees His own life as a man all at once. Is Christ there in those moments since He is outside of time? Well, sure He is. He is in those moments. He's looking into the future. Is He looking into the future when He agonized in the garden? Was He looking at us in adoration at Mass, breaking the commandments, going to confession, doing the sacraments, raising our kids and grandkids properly? As He goes along His Via Dolorosa, is He thinking of us in adoration? As He suffers the pains and agonies of His passion, in between the whip blows, the scourging or the crowning of thorns or the spitting or the mocking, He sees all of our moments in time, including when we go to adoration. Is it possible that as He suffered, He saw doors in the future who would be there for Him? Who would be there for Him as He endured the lashes and the blows of the whips? As He received the nails into His adorable hands and feet? Is He looking around, searching for us in His passion, for the love that He died for? The love we delivered to Him when we go to adoration, is He searching for that? Remember when He says on the cross, "I thirst"? It's our love that He thirsts for. Next time, no school cafeteria. All right. He waits for us there. For those who have responded to His call when He asked, "Could you not watch 1 hour with me?" Why would He ask the apostles that, and those words be preserved for us today, if they don't mean anything? They do mean something. He does want us to watch 1 hour. That's what Mass is. That's what adoration is, placing ourselves at the foot of His cross to be with Him in these moments of His suffering. Now, what's the value of an hour to God? What's an hour worth to Him? To the one that created time. What's an hour worth to God? What is an hour worth to someone who sees all time, all at once, to whom all hours are present at the same time? It is priceless. 1 minute to God is priceless. 1 hour is immeasurable. To us, though, it is 60 minutes out of our lives, but to Him it's so much more. It's everything. Adoration is a way for us to tell Jesus, we believe what you said. Committing to 1 hour of adoration is our amen to Jesus. Why? Because unlike your Sunday obligation, it is not obligatory. We go to adoration because we want to. We go to adoration because we choose to. You're supposed to go to Mass on Sunday. It's church law. But it's not church law that you go to adoration. He knows we've committed that 1 hour to Him because we were not forced or obligated to. We did it out of love. To make reparation for the outrages leveled against his sacred heart and the Immaculate Heart of Mary, our mother. I don't know about you, but age comes with its own aches and pains and suffering. Take up your cross and follow me, he said. In adoration, Jesus is walking with us. He's eclipsing in a very real way our own suffering, meeting us wherever we are on our walk toward him, with our crosses on our backs, climbing towards eternity with him. So no matter where we are in our lives and how much suffering we have and how much pain, Jesus is right there with us the whole way. Can we devote 1 hour to him? The blessings I've received in my last 34 years of adoration are countless. Spiritual, personal, professional blessings. Miracles experienced and witnessed. Things I need to do with my time that I don't know where the time comes from, but I'm able to do them. And who can measure the amount of graces received by devoting that 1 hour a week to him who gives us miracles every moment of our lives? You got up this morning. Had a very good friend, an old lawyer who died. Sometimes lawyers do die. And I know, don't clap. So this old lawyer friend of mine, I'd say, hey, Joe, how are you? And he'd say, well, I woke up this morning. That's a miracle. He woke up. He got up out of bed. He went to work. We have transportation. We have air conditioning, I hope, most of us. We have food, shelter, clothing, children, grandchildren who love us. Those are all miracles every single day. Suffice it to say that I get more out of 1 hour per week in adoration than I give to Jesus. A lot of parishes have some form of Eucharistic adoration and are always asking for volunteers to sign up for 1 hour. I bet if you think long enough, you can probably remember a parish that's got Eucharistic adoration. St. Luke's does, St. Matthew does, I think St. Pius does, St. John Newman. Several parishes have Eucharistic adoration maybe only on Fridays, or maybe only from Friday morning overnight to Saturday, the 40 hours once a month. They do that. If you haven't signed up yet, don't wait any longer. And if your parish doesn't have some form of adoration, find one that does. Go see Jesus, who cannot wait 1 minute more to see you and to spend that time with him. Just as he thought about each and every one of us on the cross, so he waits for each and every one of us in adoration. When you're not there, he misses you. And when you're there with him, tell him how much you love him, what you need, what your family and your neighbors need. But he already read my mind. He already knows, I know. But you already know your grandkids love you. How much do you love to hear when they say it? Just as he thought about each and every one of us on the cross, so he waits for each and every one of us in adoration. When you're not there, he misses you. When you're with him, tell him how much you love him. As we come into our winter years, that's what they call them. And I always liked winter, by the way. Who among us does not wish he or she could have done things more in accord with the will of God? How many of us think every day, Lord, am I doing your will? How many of us think we may not have used our time as wisely as we should have? Who among us has no regrets at this age? How could I have shown God more love? How could I have loved my neighbor more? Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life. He said the way, the truth, and the life. The way, follow me, do what I do. What did the gospel say? Store up your treasure in heaven. What better treasure than to store up ours with Jesus? Where your heart is, there is your treasure. You cannot make a mistake by making your holy hour one of your ladders to heaven. There's no way. So let us resolve to go and see our Lord. and give him our hearts as he has given us his. Thank you.